When I was born, I'm told that my grandfather cried because it's a girl child. She always felt that I shouldn't be asking for support or financial support from anybody and I should be self reliant. I was deeply affected by what happened during COVID. You are normal, you behave okay, people accept you. The most painful journey that one has to go through is just that 10 centimeters of the birth canal. I always keep saying my patients that when the baby comes into the hands, congratulations, but this is a 25 years project. It's not only the baby that is born, a mother also is born along with that.
Welcome to the Life Grits conversation. Today, we have someone very, very special, Dr. Rajeshri Paladi. She is a very experienced, highly knowledgeable, day in, day out in clinical and also in academic experience. She deals with women, and then obviously we will be interested to have a beautiful, in-depth conversation, right? And she's also president-elect of Karnataka State Obstetrics and Gynecology Association. It's a big deal, and it's an honor for me today to have conversation with you, Dr. Rajeshri. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad. I was so excited from the time that it was decided that I'm going to have a conversation, and I think I can write an examination in gynecology and obstetrics. Definitely, no. Can we know a little about you? I know you're from Gulbarga. Can we know about your education? And the very exciting part about your entire profile was it is so much organizational and leadership of associations.
Pranams. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I'm pretty much excited as well because, we deal with patients and we're in the clinics and we're in the hospital all the time. And being able to convey whatever we need to over a bigger platform is indeed a big opportunity. I was born and brought up in Gulbarga, which you know is in the North Karnataka, the Kalyan Karnataka.
And it's called Kalburgi also.
It's now called Kalburgi, yes. Previously it was Gulbarga and now it's renamed as Kalburgi. My father is a doctor. Yeah.
Okay.
And my mom is a housemaker, homemaker. I'm the only child for my parents.
Okay.
So back then...
what was he specialized in?
He is specialized as a pediatrician.
Oh, child.
He deals with children and babies. So I belong to a community wherein, business is the mainstay.
Okay.
And not many men also are educated. Yeah. Education is considered as a waste of time and money back then. So most of them are into businesses and, Arevesha. So they deal with many kind of businesses and they're all very successful, very enterprising people.
Yes.
So my father being a doctor, he had a big responsibility to take care of his entire family of siblings.
Okay.
He had 3 brothers, and then 4 sisters. He being the eldest had kind of responsibility because he was the only educated person and earning member of the family.
Okay.
His parents were just farmers and they were living in the village. So when he came to Gulbarga and started his family, when I was born, I'm told that my grandfather cried because it's a girl child.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that was the fact back then. I was the first grandchild of the family, entire family, both my mom's side and my dad's side.
Okay.
After which, somehow my parents, they chose only to have one child, which I really salute to the decision taken then.
It's a rebel story.
It's a rebel story, indeed.
In itself, yeah.
Yeah, in itself. Because, having to cater for the family of such big members, to serve and provide. And this is in 60s that we are talking of. And then they trying to focus more entirely on the family members. It was such a selfless act. It was such a big act for my mom also, But then she had to face the social kind of issues as a woman.
Comments and
Yeah, the comments and all that. It's a girl, and then only child and only girl child and all that. So somehow I feel she has been the reason that what I am today. She's been the force and she's been the power that she made me into what I am today.
amazing.
It's totally for her. I owe my life to her because uh, I was good in my studies, and I was put into a convent school, which itself, again, by those standards and those days, family background, was quite a big decision that my parents took to get me educated in a convent school. And they really shaped, Christian missionary school,
Okay.
proper Christian missionary school, who were very strict, and so much of rules and regulations and discipline and mannerisms, and all that started inculcating. Although, the home ground was very reserved and conservative, but being exposed to a good school made it really a difference in my way of life. The kind of friends, the kind of surroundings, the culture around what is there, and everything is the compound, the campus life is so good when you're in a convent school, and it's also organic. There's nothing. We didn't have a scope for anything else, but to be the disciplinary life.
And there's a school,
Yeah.
home,
Yeah.
education. This
Yeah.
was all your life.
That's all about it. And at the same kind of culture at the home also, also.
Did you
rigorous.
decide to become a doctor even then? Or what motivated you to get into the science?
Yeah, I was coming to that actually. Because I was the only child, I had a girl. I did very well in school, and I was a topper in the districts and district the exams and all that.
Wow.
The best outgoing student of the school. That inspired my mother.
Was it natural that you were a gold level student, or was
There
it
was
some
no
force?
pressure from home at
So
all.
it was a natural you.
It's just natural, for me, it was like to be the top was the natural
By
thing for me.
default.
I couldn't think of anything lesser than first, second, or third ranks, and I would sit and cry if my performance was less, and that was all by myself. Nobody told me because
Okay.
neither my father nor my mother
No pressure.
no pressure at all. But then when I did well in the school and my performance was very good, and I was kind of all-round representative in be it in arts and be it in performing in the dance or dramas or representing the school or the sports. I happened to be a district topper in the sports as well. That is when
You had an active childhood.
yes,
Very, very active.
happy childhood,
Happy childhood.
stress-free, natural, just go with the flow. And even when I did perform well sometimes in the marks or anything, my father and mother would always say, "Why are you so worried? Why? It's okay. It's fine." And then when I came first also, they never gave the overdue significance for that. It's like, so what? You will only get. Who else will get? And if it's okay. I mean, that was the kind of balanced outlook.
Brilliant, no?
There's no pressure. There's no
Applause
or
and parties
no,
and like,
no.
oh, you are the first rank now. Come on, let's go for a
Absolutely
part,
nothing,
vacation, no celebration. It is a good balance.
Perfect balance,
Wow.
to take the life as it comes.
This is something which our generation
Unique. So
New
unique, so unique. There was no reward or punishment.
Brilliant.
It's just that go with the flow. You do well, okay, fine. You do well for yourself. If you don't do well, fine. There are many other things in life, not just marks or not just
No
performance.
glamorizing the first rank also.
Absolutely.
And no demeaning the...
And then when I got the award of the best outgoing student, I expected that my parents and my family or everyone would come along and then they make a big show out of it. It was all taken so in a balanced way. Matter of fact, it's all right. We are proud. It's good, and it's good for you. That's it.
Wow, that gives you that background, that foundation to be is always balanced at anything. No, that created a good foundation for you.
And let me tell you, that was the principle wherein my mind was so adapted to take as it comes. And even now, when something big happens, I'm like, okay, fine.
This is what people are spending, going to workshops and all the retreats and trying to take things as it is.
Yes, I think I owe it to my parents the way they brought me up in a such principled manner. People would expect that only child of a doctor and should be pampered and should
Spoiled brat.
Spoiled brat, which was the reverse. They were so strict because I was the only child and there was no scope to get spoiled.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's how when my mother, she noticed it, and she saw how I was getting affected if I don't get encouragement in the line of education. She actually fought with my father. She's the only girl, only child. I want her to be a doctor. And I also wish to be a doctor as well, because there's nothing else I knew about in life. I have to serve, I have to work. And
But why did you want to be a doctor?
yeah, because I saw my father. He was being so resourceful, so helpful. And so many patients used to come home. So many relatives used to take his help. So many friends, they would come, and our house was like, like a guest house. All the time, everybody, people were there from village, from my mom's side, from my dad's side. They all
So you
came,
saw
stayed,
him touching life very
lives,
positively.
and making change in the lives. And then I saw him that he supported his family. He took care of his siblings. All right. And such is the power of education and becoming a person of value in the society. And I think even now, doctors are the most respected individuals because of their knowledge, because of the hard work, because of service, the change they make in lives, and in fact, help to give lives and all that. So I too was inclined to become a doctor.
Okay.
In fact, mine was the first batch of CET exams, back then.
Wow.
Yeah.
CET was the first time. Okay.
When I took my exams.
Was there NEET then also?
No. There was no NEET. There was no NEET. There was entrance exam concept started with my batch.
Okay.
And we didn't know what entrance exam was.
So you were not going to centers to get prepared?
No, nothing. It was only performance based. And that too, after the exams were over, we got to know that we'll have to face another exam to get a seat in the medical college. So luckily, yes, I got there also. And then I entered the medical school, and that's how the life started. And most importantly, most significant thought which, changed the direction of my life was when my mother felt that the woman should be empowered. She always felt that I shouldn't be asking for support or financial support from anybody, and I should be self-reliant. And that's how she started grooming my life. At the age of 17, 18, they taught me car driving. I was maybe the first woman in the entire city of Gulbarga to be learning and driving a car. And the reason given was that this is not for you to flaunt in the car. This is the times when your father is not there around you and you need to go somewhere that you need to be learning.
It's a must-have skill.
It was a life survival skill. It was not a skill to roam around. And after I learned the car driving, the car was kept in the garage and locked, not to be used by me.
Okay.
I didn't have a license. Again, and I didn't have the expertise to be going in the traffic and all that. It was necessary skill which I was taught, and also I was
this must be in 80s, and at that time, a mother motivating her daughter to drive and just
exactly.
That is amazing. That shows the power of women, how they change their lives, not themselves but also their own generation.
Very true. And she being the eldest among the sisters as well, her other two sisters were not so enterprising. Although they were highly educated and one of them went to a convent school, but this woman, my mother, she was so brave. She was so bold. She was so sure and firm about what she wants out of her daughter that she taught me all the life skills and then groomed me in a way that, I stand up for myself and be able to do the best of the service what I can do.
I also understand right now your family is also full of doctors.
Yes.
How is it? How does your conversation go in your day-to-day life? It's all medical things, or do you normally have conversations?
So we do have conversations. We do have fun. We do have yearly get-togethers.
Should those jokes be medical jokes or normal jokes?
Normal jokes. Absolutely normal jokes. There were times when, we didn't have a proper entertainment facilities in Gulbarga. This I'm talking of 90s. 2000. Maybe, around that time. 2010 or so. Just 15 years ago. There were no proper theaters or multiplexes in Gulbarga. So it used to be a norm in my family that by 4 o'clock finish the work, get into the car, go to Hyderabad, watch a movie, have good food, and next morning again drive back to Gulbarga.
Wow.
So that was the kind of family time and fun that we used to have. And yeah, it has been pretty much nice. Although we are all doctors, many times maybe it it rotates around the talk of common problems that we may have to deal with the patients and all that. But otherwise, it's been good.
Okay. Generally, when you are introduced as just Rajeshri and Dr. Rajeshri, the way people respond to you differs.
Yes.
There is respect for sure.
Yes.
There is also fear, a little fear. They don't come and aram say,
Very
just
true.
why is that, and why is that they're always treated in a pedestal? One, respect. But then to talk freely, they have an inhibition. Specifically, that too, you're from a smaller, compared to Bengaluru, Gulbarga is a smaller place. So is that difference still much there, and why do you think that is there?
You should tell me that.
Okay, respect I do. Personally, I do not have a fear, but then out of respect, we don't tend to have a fun and jovial conversation because we think they're very serious people. Doctors, okay, they are very serious people. How can we have a trivial topic with them? That is a usually inhibition I have. Oh, they must be always busy thinking about somebody's life, this one, other, and I go and tell, you look nice, and what movie did you watch? Maybe that's an inhibition. I don't go and socialize with doctors in these kind.
You're partly right there. Yes, yes, I do miss it very much. And then when I try to behave normal or be like a normal kind with anybody, they're surprised, they're confused. Now, what's wrong with the doctor?
Doctor having fun with me? Oh, wow.
Oh, what? Yeah. I would like to tell you one incident which took place recently in my life. I took a break. I went to the mountains. I spent a month time there.
Okay.
And most of the times without revealing my
identity, that Dr. Rajeshri.
It was just, casual, normal, going into a restaurant, sitting, having a chat or having a conversation and all that. It was so perfectly natural, normal, going on fine. And then this caretaker of mine who saw me, he knew what I am and my background and all that. He just kept observing and all that. He said, "Doctor, you must be having fun." I said, "Yes." "Oh, this will not happen back at home." I said, "Why do you say so?" "Because people are afraid of you. And that's why you're having a very, a common man, just my caretaker. I was staying in a homestay. And he observed that and he commented on that. I think that's how it is.
Actually, once you become a doctor, somehow normal people put them into a pedestal and make them celebrity.
Yeah.
The pains that you go have, the struggles, it's all common. Whether I'm into product management or the struggles are more or less similar. You're working in your skill and probably I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm also doing the struggle of a woman, or the fun that a woman would like to have is all similar.
Correct.
But the moment you are a doctor, you are confined to a doctor's community.
Correct.
We are expected, your friends also should be a doctor. Everything should be only around medical field.
More so, it becomes a kind of a behavior that a doctor gets into, and then, as you said, the concept or the perspective of what the people have is that a doctor is so-and-so and we have to be so-and-so with them and all that. But very close ones who are in the most inner circle, they do understand and they do treat us in the same way as...
That's a brilliant thing. So families also have that kind of a distance?
Oh, yes. It's not only families, even the relatives. Everybody behaves very differently when
you become a doctor.
Yeah. When you're a doctor and not only a doctor, you're kind of successful, and then, all those things, attacks...
That puts the pedestal much more.
It widens the gap even more. But I think it's as normal, as natural, as humane to be with everybody that I tend to be. And it's all fine. It's a part of it. But yes.
What was the first experience when you first...
I went to a movie the other day. The girl sitting next to me was delivered by me. Oh, doctor with me. And she became so stiff and I got conscious. I said, okay, fine, relax, watch the movie.
Yeah, in Gulbarga, you will end up meeting
everybody, almost.
So that will also put you like oh, when I go, I will be very much recognized as a doctor. So you would not be able to have the real fun. Like if you want to whistle for a movie, that may not be possible.
Actually, it happened. Actually, because Gulbarga is a relatively small town, and then you end up knowing many people around. It did happen that I wouldn't even go for shopping in Gulbarga, no.
See?
Not even go to a restaurant in Gulbarga, or for the fact that you're recognized or identified, or they get conscious and you're not comfortable and you're always under supervision or vision. And I would like to have something like a papad also. It becomes a very conscious
Oh,
effort.
and they will say, doctor is buying that papad. That must be
Maybe.
healthy. I know that must
And
be
although
nice.
it is a deep fried one, it's an oily one. How could I say that? Oh, no.
That is a very, puts you in a tricky situation.
Yes.
And hence,
Yes, it took a lot of effort for me to come out of that mindset.
okay.
Nearly 2.5 decades.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It's only post-COVID it hit me to
Not
live life normally.
it's not worth to keep
Not
having.
only that, COVID humiliated everybody's mindset. And I was deeply affected by what happened during COVID.
Can you explain what went?
In the sense, how the lives were treated and what happens ultimately, and what is it that we are carrying with us, the kind of aura or ego or
The firewall that we have built around us.
we have built around us is so mundane, and it's so momentous. Within few minutes, you're breathing, you're alive, and the moment you stop breathing, you're not alive.
Yes.
And then it's a body, and no longer anybody bothers for you for that. So what happened was that I felt I'm losing the connect with the people. I'm losing the connect with the life. I'm losing the natural flow of what I'm supposed to do or be. And it's just when everything, it kept shackling away, and all the boundaries started dropping, and then I started reaching out. And the thing is that you are normal, you behave okay, people accept you. It's only the way you present yourself and how you connect is what gets you closer to everybody around.
And for you also, it will be living life
full.
Why restrain yourself? And
I know.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Coming to your practices, you've been practicing 30 plus years?
Yes.
So the first experience of you being a gynecologist and obstetrician, delivering a baby, can you please explain?
Oh my God, I can never forget that, because that was such a unique thing, to be part of creating a life and to hear that first cry of the baby, to have a healthy baby in your hands. And that is out of your nurturing and care and, guiding the woman through all the 9 months that she has the trust in you, helping out the woman to deliver the baby. And in such a, the most painful journey that one has to go through is just that 10 centimeters of the birth canal. Every individual who is born normally, vaginally, or a normal delivery that we call, has to go through the 10 centimeters of the journey. That is the most difficult journey that every life has to go through to be born alive and to be healthy and happy.
The child has to come through the 10 centimeters, and the mother has to support.
And that support that the mother exerts, the pain that the mother has to go through, is equivalent to about hundreds of bones being broken. That is we have a grading for pain, and the pain scale that we call, and that is the severest form of pain that the mother goes through.
Okay. Yeah. Can we measure the pain?
There's a pain scale,
Okay.
There's a pain scale for the labor, pain scale for the bone fractures, pain scale for any injuries, and we have a grading system. So the labor pain or the delivery pain is the highest.
How would you measure the pain?
There's some various scores are there and various parameters are there.
Okay. Is there something you will stick it on?
No, not that. Not that. There's a grading system and how it is calculated and all that.
What is a minimal and what is a maximum in a labor?
There's nothing minimum or maximum.
Because
pain is pain.
But it's because some women say, oh, I had a normal delivery, but it was easy. I didn't go through because my water broke and the baby came out easily. I didn't even know. There is one set.
Yeah.
The other set, like me, I had some 12 hours of labor. Every 5 minutes, every 10.
You're lucky to have 12 hours of labor. Actually, they say that for the first time when the woman is going through labor, it could be 24 hours.
24 hours, okay.
Yeah. So one is, the girls or the women who have had an easy delivery are the ones who have been physically very active,
Okay.
mentally well prepared, aware and conscious of what they're going through,
Okay.
and they're able to participate and be effortlessly doing that labor.
Okay.
Is this, we are talking of normal natural scenarios.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And then it depends upon the height of the woman, the size of the pelvis, the size of the baby, and not every baby which comes out through every mother is the normal or anything. For a woman who is heighted about 5'3", say 5'3", 2.5 to 3 kg baby delivery would be quite easy for her.
Okay.
But for a woman who is heighted about 5 feet, to deliver a 2.5 or 3 kg baby would be very difficult. And not only the height, it's the size, the shape, the structure of the pelvis, and then the presentation of the baby's head also that matters. The baby has to be in the correct position of anterior placed and then well flexed head, and all this what we judge or assess when we are conducting the labor. So these are the various parameters which will determine whether you are going to have a normal labor or not. But then basically, when we talk of the pain of labor, there is a more severe form. So when a woman goes through that kind of severe pain, after having borne a pregnancy for 9 months, and then this is her choice that she chooses to become a mother,
Yes.
knowing very well that the 9 months are not going to be easy for her, and then the process of delivery is not going to be easy for her, and then to raise the child is not going
The
to.
first 18 months is a big
And
thing.
raising the child, I always keep saying my patients that when the baby comes into the hands, congratulations, but this is a 25 years project. Be prepared for that.
Yeah, that decision of having a baby is not that one
Just
moment.
one moment or just delivering the baby.
It's a lifelong commitment.
It's a commitment to create a personality.
Yes.
It's a commitment to the life that you have given birth to see that it's a good individual or responsible or whatever, whatever your the natural instincts that come out once you become a mother is something different.
Very
or as a parent is something different.
And then you being a woman and delivering a baby for the first time, at that time, were you mother already?
Yes, I was a mother.
You were mother. So all the more it is like another mother in you. You saw that.
I knew the pain that I went through. Mine was very difficult.
Okay.
More than 30 hours.
That is also another thing, no? You knew 30 hours of labor.
Yeah.
Oh, and it was a natural birth?
Yeah.
So you knew, anatomically you knew everything. Why is the pain and everything you knew. And then still you had to go through it. Yeah. What was running in your head that time?
It's just that I wanted it all to be normal. Although I was offered painless delivery. My husband is an anesthesiologist.
Okay.
And he was trained in providing painless delivery because he was trained in PGI Chandigarh at that time.
Okay.
Very few centers were practicing and following painless delivery. Then now it's become quite
very common.
So, many women opt for it. And I think it's good that many women opt for it. But back then he did offer, but then I somehow had a concept that no, everything has to go normal.
You
natural.
Wanted to go through.
I wanted to go through the normal natural.
It was an epidural choice, no?
Yeah.
So in the back side of back, they put
there's an injection which is given in the back which will block the pain supply and the sensation of pain. It's a kind of, the injectable or the drug which is given is an anesthetic drug which will kind of numb the conduct of pain sensation from the uterus or whatever.
You denied it because you wanted to go through and experience the pain of having the child naturally. But some people also think there might be side effects. Are there side effects for pain?
No. Millions of women across the world have taken now epidural or painless anesthesia. There are no much side effects when given with the expert hands and with the proper supervision. And like anything, even a cesarean delivery, unless it is done by an expert or proper person, there wouldn't be any complications or less complications. For that matter, even a delivery can never be a normal delivery. You can never predict which delivery is normal or which is going to be abnormal.
This is exactly my next question. Yes. Unfortunately, definitely I would say unfortunately, because I have very good experience with gynecologists and obstetricians where they think so much, take so much into consideration before they decide whether the woman should have a normal delivery or a cesarean. It's not though there are commercial aspects to it, there are different, and you know, because you are a president and you know how it is with your community also. It's not a momentary decision, or it is not just a commercial decision. It's a lot of science involved.
Absolutely not.
Can you please use this one to explain people that doctors are not randomly, blindly saying go for C-section? Can you please help us, normal women, to understand?
Yeah.
Be
As
doctors.
I said, even before the around this conversation, that see, the journey of this 10 centimeters is going to decide whether it's going to be a normal delivery or not. Okay. We have 3 factors to consider when we decide for a normal delivery. One is the passage, that is the pelvis. The passenger, there is a fetus or the baby in utero. And then the power, that means the force with which the contractions are going on in the uterus. You know, the uterus has to contract. It has to contract to expel a baby 3 kgs. Can you imagine what amount of force has to be generated, and force which has to be put in to expel the baby out of this natural place? Imagine how beautiful the creation is, how well, it's all synchronized to happen it in a manner that everything should be well. So whenever these things are occurring, there's a definite defined protocols to monitor if the labor is normal or not. See, nowadays we see that there is a less incidence of fetal mortality or maternal mortality.
Yes, it is 11 out of 100.
It's very less now compared to what was happening, and it was very common back then to hear that, okay, my mother-in-law had 10 children, 2 died during labor, 2 died after birth, and only 4 or 5 are surviving, and they went on to adulthood and all that. That's because of the problems which are occurring in labor, isn't it? And then we have also heard of so many incidences wherein, she was delivering and we lost her, and this is the other wife or mother or whatever. So it was accepted now that a mother or a baby can have complications in labor, and that's exactly the reason after delivery it's called a rebirth for a woman, right?
Punarjanma.
Punarjanma. It's not only a rebirth, I would say, at every level, because she becomes a changed person. She becomes a mother.
At all levels, physical, mental, emotional.
Everywhere. The minute a child is in her arms, then she becomes a mother. Her designation changes.
Birth of a mother, actually.
Yes. So it's not only the baby that is born, a mother also is born along with that. And the minute she gets pregnant, there are so many physiological changes taking place in the body. For one, something which is foreign to her, in all aspects. The blood group may be different, the immunological system may be different. Everything which is different and foreign is kept in her womb, and it grows and it thrives for 9 months, and then it's delivered.
Right.
So many changes and adaptations have to take place in the mother itself when she gets pregnant, and so the blood volume expands by 1.5 times, and the blood cells will increase, the weight will increase, the uterine blood flow increases to compensate for the circulation which is needed for the baby. So all these changes which are going on is for what cost? For the act of choosing to be a mother and knowing very well it could be a risky outcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that risky outcome, completely as a lay woman and the family, hands it over to a doctor. Today, that's a normal way of going. Once you know you planned a baby, and the infertility is something we need to discuss, because I know you specialize in high risk pregnancy and also fetal medicine. So we'll come to that. But then this decision of taking normal...
Actually, we were talking about that of normal delivery and cesarean. So once we are monitoring the progress of the labor, there's a duration for outcome of labor. It's not that 6 hours or 12 hours. There's a definite period of time within which a woman has to deliver.
Okay.
So we say that a woman who is in labor should not see 2 sunrises or 2 sunsets.
Oh.
As in within 24 hours, the process should be completed.
The modern medicine has this? Because I have heard this in Ayurveda doctors telling that.
Yeah.
Oh, even modern medicine follows that.
It's not just the modern medicine, it's the description of the stages of labor that we call.
Okay.
So a primigravida, that means the first time the patient who is in labor. It's called a primigravida.
Ah.
And then a multigravida, the second
Second.
pregnancy onwards. So there are different definitions for which, we categorize it as a normal labor or a prolonged labor or a prolonged obstructed labor. And then we keep monitoring the baby also. Because with each uterine contractions, there's a lot of stress to the baby as well.
Sorry to cut you in. As a doctor, do you take a decision that this woman will be able to do normal delivery in the 5th month, 6th month, or is it decided only in the last 8th or 9th
Yeah.
month?
See, in the 5th or 6th month, we can have a general description of whether her pelvis is adequate and, the structure is good enough. The bony frame is all right. There is no, what we call is narrow pelvis or, the bony distance is favorable.
Okay.
That is the only assessment. The final test is only when the baby is in 9th month and only when she's in labor, actually.
Okay.
Because the kind of adjustments which are needed by the baby happens only during labor.
Okay.
So maybe the head was transverse, it has to rotate anteriorly, it has to flex and then get delivered. So suppose in the process of rotation it becomes posterior, it gets deflexed.
Okay.
Or the diameter is not adequate. There's an optimal diameter through which the baby has to pass through, and for which the diameter of the head also has to be able to adjust to the, the
It's
shape of
flexible.
the
It's kind of the head becomes a little flexible.
Actually, the fetus has to decide whether it will be able to thrive and
The
strive
child
and-
starts to perform even in the womb.
Yes, that depends upon actually the position of the head and the thing that it decides whether it's going to be a normal delivery or not.
Okay.
So suppose say the head it flexes, it fails to rotate, it remains transverse, then definitely it can't be negotiated out through the normal outlet. So these are the kind of.
But when so on the table when you're
Yeah.
we should have something here. Next time we'll plan something. Yeah, that is. Illandra chair on churu hinge ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು.
It's okay. I'll be able to take it. No, it's okay. Is it going good?
How are you enjoying the conversation?
No problem.
Do you like
Show up. Hello. Am I getting serious in my facial expression?
No. It is actually it's very natural. It's like because
So, yeah, when the pain starts or the labor pain starts, these are the assessments which we do for the baby along with the fetal heart rate assessment. So, fetal heart rate is a direct evidence of the fetal well-being in the uterus. Okay, even when the contractions are taking place. We have a monitor system like the ECG for the adults. We have what is called as the CTG, that is the cardiotopography,
okay.
wherein the wave pattern will be noticed. There will be variations in the beat pattern. And depending upon that, we can assess whether the baby is going for distress or not.
Okay. So much of considerations, not one or two parameters.
Absolutely not.
It is not a random.
No, not at all. And then, unfortunately, nowadays the girls are not ready to go through the pain of labor, in spite of doing so much of counseling for painless delivery and helping them.
Are you saying the young women are asking for C-sections?
Yeah. Many of them, they keep asking because they say that we have to go through the pain also. And then if it doesn't happen normal, then we go for C-section. Demand C-section is actually on a rise, but we keep counseling and telling that, keep your ways right. Do your work right, be physically active. And nowadays there are so many beautiful exercises and yogasanas and postures which will help. And in fact, I personally advise the girls when they go into the 9th month, do everything possible. Keep yourself so physically fit and active. Do sweeping, do mopping, do any kind of laborious work that you can do because it loosens up the joints, it loosens up the muscles, it loosens up and.
But they don't.
I don't know. I don't know because the kind of.
What is the percentage of in the last 30 years? How do you see the percentage changing from normal delivery to C-section?
It's actually sadly on a rise. which shouldn't be happening because with so much of
Any
intensive monitoring.
numbers you can say, like earlier it was with 30% C-section now, and today it is 30% normal. Can we kind of come to that kind of a number?
Maybe you are quite close to that. Previously it was about 25-30% of cesarean section. Now it's
Ulta.
more than half, 50% or more.
And
doing
out
cesarean
of
section.
this 50 to 70% today, whatever C-section is happening, it's sad thing, like women are they are asking for it.
Yes. See, a lot of counseling and teaching is needed in this aspect, because what happens is that in a cesarean section, it may be just a few hours of pain, and then they're okay with it and that they get going. But a lot of changes are happening in the body as well.
Border aspect.
Yes. And a scar is a scar. And once you cut through the tissues, then definitely it doesn't get back to normal. Like it's something like, there's a cut in the cloth and you stitch it back. Definitely it doesn't come back to normal. There always remains a scar or a weak
What
point.
happens in normal delivery? Yes, the passage, very critical, and it's a sacred journey that the child takes. But in C-section, what is happening? Where are you cutting, and what are the impacts that's happening? And because it was a C-section, then the pathway was not used. What are the side effects?
Well, the side effects are not exactly in the form of bodily damage. See, in a C-section, the abdominal layers are opened up.
Okay.
The abdominal layers are opened up and the baby's head is delivered through the abdomen. That's the thing. And then we suture it back in 5 layers and it gets back to normal. What can happen is that, say if it was when we say it is a difficult cesarean, that means the woman is in labor and due to some reason is not able to deliver and the head is impacted or jammed and it is stuck in the pelvis, and to deliver out the baby from the pelvis.
And that's where they use a suction cup.
Yeah, suction cup is used when the forces of labor are inadequate in a normal vaginal delivery. In a cesarean also we can use the suction cup through the abdominal wound or the incision in the uterus. That is for other reasons that we call it as a floating head, or when the head cannot be grasped easily and we need some pressure to pull it out, and then we use the suction cup. But then what happens is that when there's a deeply impacted head, when we are doing a cesarean and we are trying to deliver the baby, and there could be damage because of the fact that something is already distorted there. And then when you're trying to deliver the baby abdominally, there could be injury to the important structures which are surrounding there. Like we have the urinary bladder, and then there could be excessive bleeding because of the stretch of the uterine. And what happens, during a term pregnancy is that the amount of blood supply which goes to the uterus is huge.
Okay.
With each heart rate, there's 70 to 80 ml of blood which is going there. Okay, that means in a minute there could be about a loss of about 700 to 800 ml of blood.
That's huge, no?
That's huge, because that is the supply, the demand for the growing baby, which is about 2.5 to everything what it needs is coming through the mother's blood. So nature is designed in such a way that lot of blood gets pumped to the uterus. So the vessels are already so engorged, they're so big, and suppose there's some damage which occurs to these structures, and there's a huge bleeding which takes place, which could be torrential and life-threatening at times. So these are the kind of risks that can happen during a cesarean section. These are immediate risks. Then there could be delayed risk in the form of wound infection or non-healing of the wound, or then sometimes if the tissues are weak, then herniation can take place. And then when we have to repeat or do again cesarean section, there could be problems with the adhesions that we call. The surrounding structures may be difficult to dissect out and to get the planes, like the urinary bladder or the intestines, and important structures which are there around the uterus may get stuck up and they may get damaged or injured. So these are the kind of complications which can occur with a cesarean delivery.
Okay. But without understanding all these things, when people choose C-section, you can tell them how many ever times. And now the astrological, I want to give birth at this particular day, this particular time. Knowing all these things personally, you would always recommend normal birth, natural birth. How do you counsel these people who personally asks for it?
See, always it's a dictum that the first birth has to be motivated to be normal delivery. So with the first cesarean section, then the incidence of repeat cesarean increases.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So,
but nowadays there is also, even if you had a C-section first, there is
a
VBAC or something.
Yeah, it's a VBAC, that is a vaginal birth after cesarean.
Uh-huh.
So there needs to be fulfilling of the criteria to attempt that VBAC also.
Okay.
So the pelvis is again to be good. If it's a narrow pelvis, then definitely you can't do a normal vaginal delivery. So suppose the first cesarean was done in situations wherein the baby was in distress, or what we call is a meconium passing. That is a sign of a distress.
Okay.
And maybe it was a breach in the first pregnancy, or maybe it was a transverse or some placental problems, which is a non-repetitive factor. That is, it may not occur necessarily in the next pregnancy. So that is when we can go and attempt for a vaginal delivery after previous cesarean section.
Okay. While preparing for our conversation, I also read that even after natural birth, 10-15 minutes later, there are a lot of bleeding, which is called hemorrhage. And because of that also, earlier there used to be a lot of mortality. And because of technology, or what made that mortality rate come down right now?
Yeah, very, very important, pertinent question that you have put in, because previously there were a lot of maternal mortalities or deaths occurring for this same reason, that women who deliver in the home, there are no facilities. The facilities wherein you can give injections and prevent the loss of blood is what we call as the atonic postpartum hemorrhage.
Okay.
And the postpartum hemorrhage, or the bleeding which occurs after delivery, is mainly because of 3 to 4 reasons that we call. That is, the atonicity is the leading one, the tone. Matlab, the uterus has to contract back.
Quickly. Naturally, it has to go back.
Okay. Otherwise, there's so much of blood flowing to the uterus, and once the sinuses are open, it's like an open tap that, it keeps flowing.
Nature quickly retracts
it.
Okay.
It has to retract. And now we have medications for helping in the retraction of uterus. We call it as oxytocics. Like we have the oxytocin, we have the methogen, we have the prostaglandins. So these are the various drugs. Now it has become a mandatory thing to administer them, and this we call it as a active management of labor.
Okay.
Active management of labor, wherein this dictum have to be followed. And just by following these certain principles, there is a lot of reduction in the hemorrhage which occurs postpartum. So one of which is a tone. Then you have the trauma. That means if there's an injury, like I said, to the uterus or to the birth passage, or and then there's a retained tissue. Suppose the placenta has not come out completely, then the bits and pieces which are remaining there can cause bleeding, because the uterus cannot contract completely.
Correct.
The sinuses.
It's a foreign body.
It's a foreign body.
But till now it was part of it. Suddenly it has become a foreign
body. And part of it which remains there keeps the blood vessels open. So that again causes bleeding. And then we have these factors called thrombins. There's a coagulation system within the body which helps to secure the bleeding wherever the bleeding. It's a beautiful system what nature has designed for humanity.
It is also beautiful how humans and how doctors have identified the nature, worked closely with the nature for the healthy community only.
To understand what is happening there. I think this was mainly in the 18th or 19th century, early 19th century and late 18th century. Tremendous change and discoveries happened everywhere. Be it physics, be it science, be it
golden period of
humanity,
technology,
and then medical, and whatever was described then is still the same. Anatomy remains the same, whatever it was described in the 18th century. So it's beautiful the way in which it was described and analyzed and scientifically put down, and then given a logical sequence for everything, whatever is happening then.
Right.
So as I said, the hemorrhage is mainly because of these 4 factors, and previously this was the leading cause of death.
Okay.
Now with the institutional delivery, there's a great move towards institutional delivery now, especially in the past 1.5 decades.
Right.
Previously only 30% of the women would deliver at hospital.
Okay.
Now, hardly 10% deliver at home.
And thanks to those ASHA and A&M workers.
Absolutely. The rigorous and the very, very robust system of medical healthcare which has been developed at the grassroots level. Every primary health center, every ASHA care worker, every PHC, they have a target now. So many deliveries have to be conducted in the... So beautiful. Even cesarean deliveries are being done in the Taluka health hospitals, in the CHCs and all such.
Okay.
Because, see, what happens is that it's an integrated system. The failure in the system at every level. say a woman who is staying 20 kilometers or 30 kilometers away from Bangalore, she may not reach Bangalore in time for the failure of transport.
Yes.
For the failure of roads, for the failure of resources, or not having personnel at the time when she's in labor. So all this was thought of very nicely by the healthcare system of the government, and then it has been made as a protocol that everything is followed so perfectly well that each woman, when she gets pregnant, is identified by the ASHA worker. She's taken by the ASHA worker to the health centers, to the nearby health center. She's registered there. She's seeing to it that all the basic investigations as developed by the the healthcare system are followed. And now what we have is the respectful maternity care.
Yes.
True. It's called the respectful maternity care is the coin term to deliver the woman who is in labor. So all this has been
I remember there were days my mother used to say, oh, since we were women and we can still speak thing, you had fun, now you're struggling and screaming.
That is exactly what is criminal now to shout it out in the labor room. It's called respectful maternal care. That there are guidelines, there are principles, even for the behavior of the person who is conducting the labor, who are there around in the labor room. And then the woman has a choice to make of her own. We have to go by the choice of the pregnant woman. Beautiful. If she has to deliver in a hospital, then she's given a choice of the hospital. She has to be given a choice of the hospital. She has to be given a choice of the people who are going to accompany her in the hospital. In fact, certain hospitals, the corporate ones, they take the signature of the woman who is in labor as to know who should be her accompanying person in the labor ward.
Okay.
Yeah, she has a choice to make whether it will be the mother, it will be the husband, it will be the in-law. So it goes by the choice of the girl who is in labor.
Okay.
So this is what is so beautifully being done now to see that it becomes what is needed in pregnancy or labor. Simple. It's just the tender, loving care. And that makes the entire journey very easy and smooth. And she deserves it, why not? For having taken the choice of becoming a mother to get pregnant, and it itself is a big sacrifice and a big risk that she's putting herself, her life into, not knowing what the outcome would be. And it becomes our bound duty to see that this woman who has chosen to be so gets the best of what we can do for her.
Yes, one from this healthcare and from the love and affection.
Family, the love and affection to be, it's no more that my mother also or mother-in-law, the grandmother, they all delivered and why not you?
Cats and dogs are delivering, why not you?
It's not the same
anymore.
Emotions for the human. There are emotions, especially in the pregnant girl, which are so triggered, anything can trigger her off in the wrong or the right way. So many psychosis and so many cases of problems which can occur, the puerperal depression, puerperal psychosis and all. It's because that she's going through so much of hormonal imbalance which is taking place at that time, and the demand of the new responsibilities which are there, the lack of sleep, the lack of food, the lack of care.
So
the lack
PPD, the postpartum depression is real?
Absolutely, it's real. We are lucky to be born in India and to be surviving in the societies. Actually, there are studies conducted that which says that the Asian kind of care for the postnatal woman that we get is very, very important, and the incidence of PPD is less in the Asian, because everywhere you go, India, China, Japan, everywhere in the Asian countries, there is a system that there's a support, there's a family, there's a the whole village comes around to see.
Whether you know the pregnant woman or not, you go gift them something.
Not only give them, you're there around.
Yes, anytime.
Anytime.
And then in Tamil Nadu, I come from Tamil Nadu, we say prasavathirku ilavasam. I mean, if you're delivering, I'm free for you to come anytime. I'll not charge you. That kind of the community comes together during pregnancy.
It's because of the genuineness of the cause, what we are doing, and why not? She deserves it because she has to adjust to the new things which are happening within her body. Her physiology is drifting. She has to shed away all that she has gained. The body components will shed away. The blood volume will decrease. Her size will decrease. And also the hormones are, trying to stabilize. So there's a rise in estrogen and progesterone during pregnancy, and which becomes less after the delivery of the placenta and all that.
Okay.
And then every 2 hours she has to get up to feed.
Yes. No sleep.
Every 2 hours she needs to be fed to get adequate nutrition.
And that too patya. I mean, there's a diet.
Which is so, I mean, it's not actually right to restrict herself to the pregnant woman because she requires more calories and nutrients at that point of time. But
that doesn't mean a heap of rice.
Yeah.
You need a balanced
balanced
food. So when today people talk in cities, PPD has become very postpartum depression has become a kind of a cool word, you know, the thing. But it's not just cool, it is real topic to be addressed. And many women will not even know that they are going through postpartum depression. But how is it in cities versus smaller towns?
Cities, and be it the developed worlds or be it the most modern societies, I have seen a woman who on the 4th day of cesarean, I had been on a visit to Australia 25 years ago. Now this girl, after discharge, they are discharged within 72 hours after cesarean delivery. And the next day, she just ties the baby in her back and, the kind of baby wrap that they have. She drives down, goes to a mall, does shopping for herself, for the requirements of what is needed for her and for the baby, and comes back home. So just imagine, will that happen in our towns? Never. The girl is not allowed to step down from the bed for 40 days.
Fully covered.
Put
a cotton.
Yes.
Wear a sweater.
At times that may sound extreme, but the kind of pampering, the care, the love, the concern that she gets is so soothing. It's so healing. She requires the time to heal.
But physically, is that Australian woman 25 years back, was that right? Or today we say Banantana, which is the postpartum care. See, which is needed?
It's not necessary to restrict the woman physically.
Okay.
More ambulation, more mobility is definitely required, be it a cesarean or be it a normal delivery. But when this woman had to go out on her own, step out, get into the car, drive down to the mall, which is so many kilometers away, shop for herself in that cold weather, come back home, unpack, take the baby back, cook for herself, look into the baby. How much of stress is that?
That's too much.
That's too much. So what was described as a 40 days of rest after is validated scientifically.
Okay.
That much is the days required for the body to get back to normal.
Are there research papers?
Yes. We call it as puerperal period.
Okay.
The puerperal period is actually for 42 days after delivery.
Brilliant. How it coincides with our
ancient methods and traditions. It's not only in India. Even recently I read through some papers which were published in the China and, the Asian countries that I was telling of, that the Daya, Aya, Dola, whatever the names are, the various names are, is a valid system to support the woman who has delivered.
Wow. It's time for us to integrate everything. And probably today's generation is asking papers, proof. So probably it's beautiful way 42 days is validated technically and scientifically that you need that care. And if it is done, postpartum...
the healing is better. The recovery is faster. The nutrition and the health is much better. Psychologically, she's so stable. She's so at peace, and she's so comfortable to delegate her responsibilities which have cropped up new. And she's so unprepared. Most of our girls are not very educated as to how this process of pregnancy, delivery, there's no training.
That leads to a question where today, just because a mother who has got 2 children, today without no certification or some certification, online certification, they become pregnancy counselors, child counselors, influencers. Basically,
it's a need of that. There are many centers who are offering the antenatal classes.
Lamas
are the postnatal classes, and the couple are given classes as to train them as to see how these classes go. But unfortunately, these are being marketed as something luxury. It's not at all. It's a basic thing you need to know.
The thing is, earlier it was a larger family, joint families where it all happened naturally. Today, that luxury is not there. So we had to pay and get these services done. And somehow, this younger generation are not ready to listen to their own mother if they...
Absolutely not.
But if you pay for 5,000 rupees or something, and whatever the counselor says or the influencer says, they're ready to listen. How is that impacting when they come to consulting?
Most of the times it's the consultant who would have directed them to go to such classes.
Okay.
Having known that what is the pattern of coaching or training that goes there and the modules which are taught, everything from conception to the care and to the changes which take place in the body to make them conscious of what physical changes that they can expect, how the various reproductive organs are adapting to get ready for the even the breastfeeding, and how
they literally give a baby doll and they hold
and in a way it's good, because being brought up in nuclear families, most of the girls are unaware of how the entire process goes through.
But in these classes, there are some classes where they make them do rigorous dances. Do you recommend that? Or
I feel it's not just the dances, not the dancing for the sake of dances. It's to loosen up your body. Whatever is done in a scientific way.
Okay.
Our tradition, our culture has such beautiful yoga asanas, which will help the girl to prepare for pregnancy, to be strong throughout the pregnancy. Because, getting pregnant is the strongest thing which anybody can go through. She's so strong. The body is so ready. It's so adaptive to adapt something which is foreign to her, and to go through the nurturing process for 9 months and then deliver. So there are many, many asanas which are described in
Colorful.
Yeah. Well, I do attend a class, Raj Yoga session by our teacher, who has made us so strong and so appreciative of whatever is there around us. And also there are classes for the antenatal girls, and their experiences have been wonderful. They say that we feel so confident to go through all this.
The best thing is when you,
Yes,
the celebrated doctor from the modern medicine, telling younger women to go for these classes, that is something very beautiful and powerful. It'll empower these people to, many people, because it's modern, they say, no, my doctor wouldn't recommend. But when the doctor herself recommends, you go to the yoga class, make yourself strong, that becomes much more powerful.
I feel it's a bound duty of every educated person. And having understood our inheritance, our culture, our traditions, our philosophy of life, I think there cannot be anything well explained beyond the yoga that we have. It's not just yoga. It's not just like our teacher says, it's not just bending, twisting, turning, shaking. It's not a circus that we do. It incorporates a system into your life wherein your energies are regenerated, they're directed, they're focused, and they train and tune you in such a way that everything about you changes. Even if you go through our Mahabharata, is the 18th chapter. It is only in the 3rd chapter or 4th chapter that yoga is described. But otherwise, in the 18 chapters, we have the description of life, how we have to conduct in each situation of life.
Yes.
Okay. So it's the mindset, basically. And then when we tune our mindset to be able to absorb whatever is there in our culture, it's not for fun that, over 8,000, 10,000 years, that the system has remained prevalent. And now, unfortunately, because of the invasions, we were ruled for more than 2,000 years by somebody.
And Nalanda burning still hurts me.
Yeah. So somebody came, they ruined us, they devastated everything, they broke it down, everything for the intention that it has to be broken down. And we somehow have accepted that fact, and we look up to the West and to see that the Western world, whatever they're doing is right. We tend to forget that whatever existed with us was so validated and so much of significance and of value. And now, when the West started doing yoga, we started doing yoga.
Sad. That's
the saddest part.
Because somebody always had to market us something.
Yes. And even now, thanks to the current government and the leader that we have, that he has projected India in such a big way. But otherwise, we were always looked down upon.
Yeah.
And we ourselves, our psychology had become such that we always looked up to them to be validated and to be shown that they are bigger, better, greater. And we always felt low about ourselves. It's only now we have become assertive. We have now started appreciating our value system, our base, our culture, our traditions.
And it's much needed because
it is scientific.
Exactly. We were doing the same thing. Yeah. So in that connect, earlier, once the woman is pregnant, we were supposed to be covered. The sari was the best thing for a pregnant woman. Yeah. But today we are having, for comfort and conveniences, we wear a lot of, the pregnant wear, which holds the thing. How do you see this, and what is your opinion on that?